Thing. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our First Communion Parent Session. Usually we have 3 First Communion Parent Sessions. For various reasons, we've just got 1 First Communion Parent Session. So I'm going to try and cover all that we do in all 3 sessions in 1 session, which will be quite a challenge as well. You'll notice we're here in the church and I'm trying to talk over a microphone. That's just so I don't need to speak too loudly because you're a bit spread out. Normally we'd be in the hall all nice and cozy together, sitting on each other's laps, all hugs and kisses and everything. But for reasons that you know only too well, we have to be distanced instead. But I think we're kind of getting used to all of that now. I'm just going to put a couple more lights on so you can see everything. We're also live streaming as well, but the live stream can only see me and maybe a couple of you as well. So don't worry too much. That's just for anyone who's not able to come to the session. And your comments, as long as they're polite, will sound absolutely fine on that as well. So welcome to anyone who's taking part online in the session. But I think it's quite good we're here because we can answer a few questions and look at a few things as well. So thank you and welcome. It's really nice to see you all. I've got to know your children quite well. I think I know pretty much all of your children and known a few of them over the years as they've been preparing for, well, they've been making their journey through Our Lady of the Rosary School and other schools as well. We've had some newer families in the parish who've come as well with their children in other schools too, and I think it's really good that we come together as a community. So the point of tonight's session is to look at a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to give a little spiritual introduction and talk, and then we're going to look at some of the practical arrangements too. However, you'll be completely distracted by the practical arrangements, probably, because I've given you a few of them too, so I better address a few of them before we begin. But let's just begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord God, we ask you to be with us. We ask you to be with our children as they prepare for their special celebration of their First Holy Communion. We ask you to bless their families at this time, that this journey towards First Holy Communion may be a really lovely journey, that the day itself will be a fantastic day, and that into the future the children will be guided and nurtured by Christ on their journey through life. We ask this through Christ our Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, before we begin, I'd just like to introduce a couple of people we have here. First of all, you can see here Mr. and Mrs. Phillips, Francis and Loxley Phillips. And these are very special people because they're our key catechists. They coordinate our First Holy Communion programme. So you'll be seeing a little bit of Mr. and Mrs. Phillips at various times. Someone once said, "Is Mr. and Mrs. Phillips your parents, Father Philip?" Their surname is Phillips, my first name is Philip. They're not actually my mum and dad, although they'd be fantastic if they was. And also we have here some other catechists as well. We have Karen, who was by the organ. She's not going to play the organ. She's not actually an organist. She just was playing by the organ. We have got Jane, who is over there as well. And we've got Sonia and Jeremy, who are at the back and we're welcoming you. They're not the only catechists. We've got quite a group. In fact, we normally have about 24 catechists, leaders, guiding the children through their sessions. And we've got the first of the, well, for many of you, the first of the First Communion workshops taking place this Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Those of you who's got children who are not at Our Lady of the Rosary School or not in Year 3 at Our Lady of the Rosary School will have already experienced a workshop. And you've all had your first reconciliation last week, and I hope first reconciliation went well. The children were lovely, by the way. But now they've got the session coming up this weekend, and I can promise you the session is going to be fun. We've got quite a few nice activities arranged for them. I'm not going to tell you what those activities are, and the children can have them as a bit of a surprise on Saturday. But I hope you've just seen everything, and you've also read the COVID risk assessment for the session on Saturday. But we can't wait to see the kids. And then there's another session, of course, in June. Now, you'll have also received, as you come in, the list of Mass allocations. Now, some of you, when you look at the list of what Mass your child is being allocated to, will be absolutely delighted. And some of you will think, oh no, I didn't really want that time. I kind of just chucked you into the 3 masses. We had to even it out. So there's 39 of you, so there's 13 at each session. And it was important we kind of evened it out because we've got a limit on the capacity in the building. And I've tried also to even it out with a sort of corresponding range of boys and girls, so it's not boy heavy or girl heavy. You are free to swap with others. So if you see someone, you make an agreement, pay them money, whatever else, you can. But if you do a swap, you must let me know. It's absolutely imperative you let me know, otherwise the swap doesn't happen. So you do need to tell me if you've agreed to swap with someone. If you do it this evening, it's fine, or late further down the line. But that's really quite important. And apologies if it wasn't the time you was after. I really did want to put everyone at 12:30. I really did, because I know that's an attractive kind of time. But it simply wasn't possible. We've contracted you into 3 masses. It was 4 last year. There was 10, 12, 2, 4. And if you got 12 or you got 10, it really felt like the booby prize. So we've tried to sort of even things out a little bit. So we'll look back at the practicals in a minute. But first of all, a couple of other things I'd like to talk to you about before. Now, one thing I wanted to say, and I would have said this at the meeting had we had it in November, is that you're welcome. It may be that you're not Catholic, or that you are Catholic and maybe you haven't been near church for a long time, but you're welcome, and I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're bringing your child for First Holy Communion. I'm just so happy that your child is preparing for First Communion, whatever your background, whatever your level of faith. And I kind of want to ask you a little discussion question, and you can talk to the person next to you. It is kind of allowed, or 2 people next to you. And the question I want you to ask yourself, or ask the person next to you, is this: why is it important that your child is making their First Communion? I'd like you to be honest. You don't need to polish the answer, but just speak to a person around you and just look at that question. Why is it important that your child is making their First Holy Communion? I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to discuss that, and then we'll come back together again. Okay, ladies and gents. So, thank you. That was a good discussion by the sounds of it. So I'm going to ask you, and you don't have to say what you said, but I think there was a few reasons going on as to why it's important that your child makes their first Holy Communion. You probably discussed a few other things as well, but why is it important that your child makes their first Holy Communion? Does anyone want to share either what you said or what you overheard someone else say? It'd be really interesting just to hear the variety of responses. Yeah, keeping the Catholic journey alive, yeah. Good answer. Tiffany? Tradition, yeah. Yeah. Dominica? Being part of the community. Excellent. Gigi? Yeah, experience of discipleship with Christ. Yeah, excellent. Any other reasons at all? Yeah, Jeremy. Receiving it for the first time. Yeah. Anything else? It's always interesting listening to groups of parents talking about the reasons why it's important for children to receive First Communion. And all of those reasons are quite regular reasons, all of them. The reasons I haven't heard are, well, my wife insists on it, or my husband insists on it, but I'm not that sure about it. I haven't heard that my grandparents, my mother-in-law would kill me if it didn't happen. The other one is school entry for Salesian, like a First Communion certificate. The other reason is everyone else in the class is doing it. I don't want mine to be the only one not doing it. It might just be the sort of group pressure. All the other children are saying it. It might be, especially if it's a girl, they want to wear the dress. They really want to wear the dress. And it might be the boy who wants to wear the suit, but there tends to be the girl that wants to wear the dress. It may well be that you had it as a little child. You made your First Communion, and it's such a special time for you. You want your child to have that memory in their life as well. It's not just part of your community's tradition, it's part of your family tradition. So the reasons why it's important for your child to make their First Communion will vary between all of you. And maybe for some of you, it's not that important to you, but you feel the kind of pressure of other people and you'd like your child to enjoy that and to experience First Communion too. So there are a whole load of different reasons why you have presented your child for First Holy Communion. At baptism, it was entirely your choice to have your child baptized. At First Communion, they have a bit of an input in it as well. Now, some of your children are probably really keen. You might, on the other hand, have children who aren't that keen. You probably don't want to admit that, but maybe you might have a child and think, I'm not sure if he really wants to make his First Communion or she really wants to make a First Communion. But whatever brings you here, whatever brings your child to the celebration of First Communion, it's a good reason. And I kind of believe whatever reason you have, God can work through that reason. I'm going to give you an example from my own journey. Some of you who've had children through the process already will already know what I'm going to say. And it's an example of really how God calls people for reasons we don't expect. Because I think the reason behind you bringing your child for First Communion is actually God. And let me explain why. Now, when I was little, I was baptized as a baby Catholic, like a lot of you. And we weren't a very Catholic family. I mean, we were. My mum was Catholic. My dad was Church of England. My mum was a practicing Catholic. Then she met my dad, and that was the end of that. My dad was in the Air Force, so in the military lifestyle, it was in an Air Force family. Going to church was not really something that most people did. And I was baptized as a Catholic, and we never really went to church. My parents dragged me to church when I was 6 at Christmas. And I remember by the time you're 6, you do know what Christmas is about. You know, trees, presents, and all of that. And I was getting ready to open my presents, and my mum said, look, we're going to church. I thought it was awful. Why would you do something like that to a child on Christmas Day? Why would you drag them to church? And my parents dragged me to church, and I sat at the back, head like this, miserable and grumpy as anything. And there was the priest at the front going, hey, so what did you get for Christmas? And I thought, silly man. I never knew that one day I'd become the silly man. So I didn't like it at all. And I made such a fuss, my parents didn't dare take me to church again. Well, there was the one or two times, but really they weren't going to try that Christmas trick again on me, because I knew what they were up to. And in future years, I made sure that I made my point known. I'd say to my mum, we're not going to church at Christmas, are we? And she went, no, don't worry, Philip. And I remember there were two girls in my class, Lucy and Victoria. I'll always remember them. And they were Catholic, they went to church, and they used to make fun of me and my friend Matthew when we were playing Lego, and I didn't like them. They were the only example I knew of Catholics, and they made fun of me and my friend Matthew, and I went to church. So all in all, this whole church thing, I wasn't that keen on. And then we got used to get taken to church at other times, Remembrance Day, parades, or because my dad been in the military, but I wasn't amused. It was not very interesting. And then, unfortunately, because we used to move house a lot, I got sent to boarding school. And I got sent to a boarding school in Norfolk, which is near Norwich, and there, to my horror, they made us go to church 3 times a week. I don't know if my parents checked this bit out before I went there, but on a Sunday we had to parade down to the parish church, and we had these kind of religious assemblies with hymns at least 3-4 times a week. It was a bit of overkill, and I think my parents didn't really check that bit. It was a Church of England school, because my parents weren't that bothered about whether I would be brought up as a Catholic or not. They just wanted a good school where I'd get a good education and be safe and looked after. But I don't think they necessarily knew that it was going to be a religious sort of thing. And we had to go to church all the time. And you know, like sometimes when you go into something and you don't have a lot of choice, maybe it's Stockholm syndrome or something like that, you do get used to it. You do get used to being dragged to church all the time. And after a while, a bit like prisoners begin to fall in love with their jailers, you actually begin to like bits of it as well. And I began to actually quite like it. I began to like the hymns. I liked the hymns, they had a nice tune. I liked the homily because I could sit back and daydream. I love that. I didn't like the Eucharistic prayer because you had to kneel down the whole time and it went on forever. But for some reason or other, it just awakened something in me. And then when I was about 12 years old, there were people in my class and they were making their confirmation in the Church of England. And they had these confirmation classes they went to of an evening, and they looked fun. And I said to my mum, I want to do that because it looks fun. Now, I haven't known a fun confirmation class ever since then. And I've run confirmation classes. But my mum said, well, the problem is, she says, you're Catholic, you can't. Unless you want to be Church of England, you need to go see the Catholic priest. And I went, what's that? So anyway, when I got home for the school holidays, I went to go and see Father Kevin. I thought, why do you call yourself Father? And I went to the church, and I went to this service that was very long. And at the end, I said, could I have a word? And he sat me in his office, and I wondered why he was wearing a long black dress. And I said, Father, I said, I'd like to make my confirmation. I just said confirmation. He said, have you made your first communion? I said, no, what's that? And he said, have you been to Mass before? I said, no, what's that? I said. And he said, well, we've got a bit of work to do. And we did a bit of work, and we had a few sessions. I can't think they were that interesting, to be absolutely honest. But for some reason or other, I ended up making my first communion and ended up making my confirmation. And my parents, who weren't pushing me exactly religious-wise at all, then said, my mum said, look, now you're confirmed, you need to start going to church, at least when you're home from school in the school holidays. And I said, do I really have to go? She said, yes. And I would go down to the church, look out the window, wait for it to be over, and want to get home and do my own thing. But maybe somehow or other something took fruit in here, because I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to have to be doing this for the rest of my life, well, if I'm going to be doing this forever, I need to find an interesting way of doing this church business. And after all, there's another sacrament I heard of called ordination. Maybe I could be a priest. If I'm a priest, at least I get to decide when the service begins and ends, and I can choose the hymns. And for that was the beginning of my sense of feeling called to the priesthood. All because I thought it'd be a bit more interesting if I got to sit at the front and I get to choose the hymns, and maybe I could make sure there was tea and coffee afterwards. And then as time went on, I thought about priesthood for different reasons. I thought, well, they probably don't work very hard. I also thought, well, they always seem to be in charge, and they don't look that clever either. I probably don't have to do much in my A-levels and GCSEs, And I thought, well, this sounded an easy kind of life, and I kind of asked about it. And then one thing led to another, and, well, I ended up at the seminary training to be a priest. Now, there's quite a few things that happened on that one thing led to another, including a realization that actually priests do have to do some work, they do have to do some study, and you don't just do it because you want to be in charge. I mean, I love being in charge, but that's not why you want to do it. And there was a sort of maturing in a sense that actually maybe it wasn't about me, maybe it was about God. Because I hadn't actually considered God in this whole thing, I just considered biscuits. And over time, I began to think, well, actually, maybe this has got something to do with God. And maybe God was calling me in language that I could understand, in a way that I could understand, and that was how I ended up becoming a priest. And so that's the reason I'm saying that is both for you and for your children, there will be different things that draw you to church. There'll be different things that draw you to coming forward for First Communion. There'll be different things that draw you to have your child baptized. And some of those things might not seem very holy, like we like a nice party, or mother-in-law expects it, or whatever, or because we're from a Catholic country and it's part of our culture. And those reasons might not seem very holy, but they might be the reasons that God is touching you. They might be the reasons that God is kind of drawing you. Now you might say, well, no, I don't believe in that kind of thing. And that's fine. But on the other hand, maybe that is what God is up to. And maybe, and what I would invite you to do on this First Communion program is to consider it as a journey, not just for your child, but also for you. Because, I'm going to read this here because I wrote a few bits down. Take this as an opportunity, because I believe that actually it's God that drew your child to First Communion, just as God somehow drew me to becoming a priest. And I believe that God is at work in you as well. So I would encourage you on this journey towards First Communion, although it's a much shorter journey than usual, to engage a little bit more deeply with your own faith. This might be the first time for you as parents when you've seriously thought about your own faith since your own First Communion day. And it might be that since your own First Communion day, quite a lot of water has flowed under the bridge. And maybe your life now is a little bit more complicated and a little less innocent than it was when you was a little boy or a little girl. And maybe you've picked up a bit of baggage, maybe you developed a bit of a history, and maybe you've lost a bit of innocence since then. And if that's the case, you've come to the right place. Because I believe that Jesus, that God, knows your history, knows your story, knows wherever you've been in life, and God loves you just the same. And maybe you're a Catholic, and for some reason or other, you're no longer receiving Holy Communion yourself. Maybe you feel that you're kind of excluded from it. Maybe you feel it's not for you. Or maybe you feel that there's things you need to resolve, and maybe you want to come and have a chat. So if for whatever reason you're Catholic and you're sort of feeling a bit out of it, you're feeling maybe I can't come up for communion, or I don't really feel worthy of this, I would encourage you not to write that off, but to come and have a chat. Come and have a chat with me or another priest, because my kettle's always on, and my door is always open. Well, not literally, but my door can be open and my kettle will be on. And if you just want to come and have a chat and a cup of tea and talk about where you are and where you'd like to be, we can have a chat. I hope that's okay. Of course, First Communion is not just about you, obviously, it's about your child. And you want to give your child a magical and unforgettable family experience of being loved and being special. I think that's true of everyone. Even if you're not coming from a particularly religious point of view, you want to give your child a magical family experience of feeling loved and special. But remember that just as a dog is for life, not for Christmas, so it is with the 3rd of July. It's important that your child knows that their faith is important in the whole of their daily life, not just something for a special occasion. And how can you do that? And I'd say think about the Catholic life of your home. Now, when I say the Catholic life of your home, I don't mean you have to dress up your house to be like the Sistine Chapel and have statues and crosses everywhere and have some sort of prayer routine 20 times a day. But try to think how you could introduce a little bit of prayer very gently into your home life. Maybe a religious object, at least somewhere in the house. Maybe talk about what you see or hear about in church, or in your child's RE sessions, or what happens in the world in the light of faith. But most of all, know that in the way in which you may think, well, we don't do anything religious at home, but actually in the way in which you take care of your children, the way in which you listen to them, the way in which you sometimes even say sorry to them, the way in which you make up after arguments, the way in which you just try and build each other up. Actually, you are living a very Catholic, very Christian way of life, even if you wouldn't identify it as that. And I would also say, if you feel brave enough, say a prayer with your child. You might think, well, I've got prayer, I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying the whole Rosary, but maybe just a prayer before a meal. Or maybe just before you go to bed, God bless Mum, God bless Dad, God bless my family. Just try and make it a little part in a subtle way that you feel comfortable doing. And also know that in so many ways there is a Catholic life in your home already. The final thing I want to say is First Communion is about belonging to a community. That's why it's called communion. Being Catholic isn't just about believing, because sometimes there's going to be times when we struggle to believe. But being Catholic is about belonging. And the idea that we belong to a community really excites me as a priest. It's probably the thing that gives me energy in leading a parish. I just love the idea that we're a family, that we're all united with each other with some bonds. And so I'd encourage you to kind of take part in the life of the community. Come to Mass as much as you can. I would say every weekend. Try to sit near the front, which means arriving a bit early, so you end up at the front. Try to get to know each other. I notice you already do that as well, especially those whose children aren't at Our Lady of the Rosary school and might sort of feel, well, I don't really know anyone. Try to reach out to those you don't know. And when there's tea and coffee after Mass, stay for a cup of tea and stay for a cup of coffee, because it's a good way of getting to know each other, especially after COVID time, when we've all been living so far apart from each other. I think the way in which we gather is even more important. So, as I said, I'm just making an invitation, really. I think God is behind this whole journey towards First Communion. And God is inviting you, and God is inviting your child. And I just invite you to be part of that as this journey continues. So that is my little spiritual talk this evening. We're now going to look about some practicals. I expect we'll finish in about 20 minutes or so, unless you have thousands of questions. Is that all right? So, let me have a little look at this. So I have given you an instruction sheet. And it says here, First Holy Communion Day, instructions to parents. And I'll just go through it little bit by little bit. You could say, well, I could have just sent it to you and you didn't need to come to the meeting, but where would the fun be in that? So, we're going to have a rehearsal the day before, Friday the 2nd of July, and the rehearsal times correspond with the Mass times. So if you're making your First Communion at 10:30, the rehearsal's the day before at 4 o'clock, and so on and so on. It's important that you come to the correct rehearsal for your Mass time. If you come to the rehearsal for the 2:30 Mass when you're on the 10:30, it will totally confuse you and your child. Seating is one thing you'll want to know. There are 13 children at each Mass. Now, this meant we had to compromise. Ideally, I wouldn't have more than 10 children, because I can have you all in the church here. But I didn't want anyone ending up with a Mass at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for First Communion, which means we have to compromise on seating arrangements, which means that some people will either be in the hall or on the side aisle. I know that's not ideal, but the alternative would have been having a First Communion Mass at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm going to try and work out the best way of doing this. I think what we'll probably do is have some children up there, some children here, some children here. Seems to be the fairest way to do it, and I'll just pull your names out of a hat. But what you will have is a row of 6 seats. Whatever happens, you will have a row of 6 seats. One of those seats has got to be for your child, the one nearest the aisle. And then the other 5 are for the family. But under current social distancing rules, a metre, which is 2 empty chairs, is required between people of different households or bubbles. So you need to do the math on that. Now, I don't know what your households and bubbles look like. So whether you follow that rule or not, I don't know about. I don't know that your bubble happens to have 7 people. I don't know, and I'm not going to be asking you. However, what I would ask you is to do the maths yourself and work that one out. And also the social distancing rules may be different on 3rd of July. But for the moment, I'm assuming they haven't changed. So it will be a row of 6, 2 seats between households. But as I said, I don't know. Also, you will have 4 other seats at another location in the church. They won't be next to you. They'll probably be in the hall. And those 4 seats are for maybe your B-list family members. You can sort of put somewhere else. So if there's someone, you can have a few more people coming. I can't give you more than 4 other seats because we just can't get you in. Now, if social distancing rules relax, we'll be able to allow more seats. At the moment, the seats are allocated to give sufficient space between rows. If they relax it, we can maybe give you a few more. But as it stands, it's 6 seats, including the child, plus another 4 seats, which is the same as last year as well. Now, as I said, you may have had a group of 30 people you was hoping to bring, and I'm sorry we can't accommodate that, but it is the best we can do under the circumstances. Otherwise, we'd have to have mass at 9, 10, 11, 12 all through the day, and I'm not sure that would go down that well. That's the situation with that. Photography, we don't let you take any photos during the Mass, apart from a special photo moment, and also outside you can take a photograph. Dress code might be surprising. Your child can wear anything they want. Sorry, they can't wear anything they want, they can wear anything you want them to wear. So anything that you consider suitable and they consider suitable. So you might want a conversation. So they don't actually have to wear the white dress. Chances are they probably will end up wearing a white dress, but they don't have to. If they're more comfortable in a tracksuit, they can wear a tracksuit. If it's their best item. I remember there was a confirmation once in one of my former parishes, and one of the kids turned up in a pair of jeans, t-shirt. And everyone thought, oh, jeans and t-shirt. But it turned out that for him, it was his best clothes. It's how he felt most comfortable and most smart in. So there isn't a rule about what you've got to wear. Well, there isn't a rule about what you've got to wear. There isn't a rule about what your children got to wear either. But obviously, you'll be making your own choices already. But what I would just say is, obviously, simplicity rather than extravagance means a bit more. And what they're doing rather than what they're wearing, it's worth emphasising that, yeah, you will look absolutely beautiful in jeans or whatever, or a white dress, but it's more important what you're doing. It would be ideal if they don't wear gloves. So whatever else they're wearing, they shouldn't be wearing gloves or carrying parasols or little handbags or little guinea pigs or whatever else with them. They need to have their hands free and empty. I've said merchandise. Best place to go is Canaan Bookshop. You know Canaan Bookshop by the Ironing Bridge, down the station path. They've got quite a good selection of Catholic stuff and some little chocolate bars as well. Now, I know that they'll probably be looking after money as well, be quite a key thing, but it's nice to give them something else besides money. Face coverings. We don't know what the rule will be on face masks in July. We just don't know. But as things stand, it will be the same rule as applies now. So face coverings will be required for anyone over 11 unless there's an exemption, but the children making First Communion do not need to wear a face covering. So they can relax, they don't need to. I think trying to get them to make First Communion, take a mask on and off, will be a bit too much for them. So whatever the rules, they don't need to wear it. It may well be that no one needs to by then, or it might be that we do. We just don't know at the moment. The car park will be closed. We're getting used to the car park being closed now, but the car park will be closed because we just need the room for social distancing. And even if there isn't social distancing, people love to chat outside at First Communion. And it's important to have a bit of space so you don't have cars reversing everywhere when you're trying to take photographs. So I would encourage you to walk to church. It's very traditional to walk to church on First Communion Day. Everyone remembers from their childhood walking to church on First Communion Day, and you might want to make that memory as well. Get to the church 20 minutes before Mass, and what I've said is one parent plus their child should go to the patio gate, so around that side. And the reason is, once you're there, they'll be invited to stand in front of the statue of Our Lady and have a nice photograph. You will need to take that photograph, but they'll have a little photo moment. You can take a very special photo of them by the statue of Our Lady. And then once you've dumped your child there, you come back into church and take your seat. And we will look after them. Then during Mass, the children will make a little procession into church, which is really lovely. And they will come and sit with you. So you'll sit in church and think, where's your child? Don't sit on their chair. They need the chair by the end. We'll go through this again at the rehearsal. Then at Holy Communion, each row will come up in turn with the First Communion child at the head of the row. Everyone will need to leave the row, even if you're not receiving communion. You come up for a blessing, otherwise the logistics just don't work. And they'll be practicing at the rehearsal how to receive First Holy Communion. And at the end of Mass, the children are invited up for a little safe distance photo, which is always very funny, having 13 children all standing 2 meters apart. And then what we do is we let everyone have a chance to take a photo of the group. So they get a group photo, they get a photo outside. So if you're worried about photos, you've got plenty of chance to take photos. And then afterwards, what I say is you might want to have a family photograph outside. And people often go to the various beauty spots around, like the statue of Our Lady, the Rosary sign, the lovely flower beds, the front of the parish office, the bin area. There's lots of places. But you'll need to leave at 1:15 so that we don't clash with the next lot arriving, because we're sort of doing masses in quick succession. I think I've explained everything. Has anyone got any questions at all? Any questions at all? Yes, Amal. Yeah, it'll be live streamed. So if you look on the Our Lady of the Rosary Stains YouTube channel, you can see what kind of view you get. I might just adjust the camera so you can see your child coming up here. Last year we had the camera there, but now we've tended to sort of fix it there, so you'll see the back. But you'll also see them for the photo, so it is live streamed. Yeah. It'll be live streamed, whatever. Yes? Oh, you know what? I've made a big mistake. So, yes. Okay, well spotted. Just, everyone look at this on your sheet. It says Saturday, 3rd of July at 13. It's actually Saturday, 3rd of July at 12:30. Does that sound all right? Saturday, 3rd of July at 12:30. Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Betty. They don't, not for the rehearsal. They can just, I mean, they'll have come just from school in some cases, so they don't need to wear it. For rehearsal, a parent needs to come, but you can wear anything you like. It depends a bit. At the moment, last year we didn't have any music because we weren't allowed to have any music. So First Communion lasted about 45 minutes, I think. Usually lasts about an hour and a quarter. Possibly, if we're allowed to have music, we might have a hymn at the beginning and end, just to give it a bit of, it's a bit like putting gravy on a roast dinner. It gives it a certain oomph, and that might lengthen it slightly. It'll certainly be no more than an hour, probably considerably shorter. Is that okay? But if you're planning stuff and booking the Hilton or anything, just remember, I'd give it an hour, and also it takes the time to get out. By the time you've chatted to everyone outside and admired each other, it does take a bit of time. Yes, Amal. Yeah, of course they can. Yeah, can a sibling sit on the lap of an adult in the 6? They can, of course they can. Yeah. And you can always, on some of the rows you can squeeze up, but you don't know what row you're on yet. So those blue chairs at the back, there's a gap between the chairs, so a very small sibling might fall between them. Yeah, but remember it'll be very uncomfortable, bearing in mind the leg room. You might not be able to walk for a while afterwards, so you can do that. If you can fit into that footprint, you can. But I wouldn't encourage you to do it. You might be able to do it for a little child. I wouldn't encourage you to do it for adults. I wouldn't sit your gran on your lap or something. Yeah. Any other questions at all? If you've got anything you want to ask me privately, I'll be around afterwards as well. Catechist, is there anything I need to add at all that I've not covered? Okay, well, yes, Jane. Oh, yeah. Regarding the workshops, so the first workshop's this Saturday. The emphasis on the workshops is fun. We used to do a course where we did sessions and stuff, but we decided we wanted the children to enjoy their preparation for First Communion, and we ran a workshop program for a while. So we got a few activities. Some of them involve handling foodstuffs in a COVID-safe manner. So if your child has any allergies, could you let Jane over there know if they've got any allergies, just so we can be careful of? Is that all right? Don't worry, they won't be getting COVID from the food, but you don't know what else other allergies they might have. So please let Jane know before you go. I think that's everything. I can't wait for your child's First Communion. They're a lovely group of kids, and you're a lovely group of parents as well. So I hope you have a fantastic journey towards First Communion. It's a really special time as we go forward. Take care, God bless, and I will see you soon.